Okay, so yesterday's video was on the Rothschilds, and we're going to continue today with a little bit more history from the Rothschilds. Keep in mind that it's mentioned that they were starting their own private intelligence. So think about that when it comes to everything that's coming out about Epstein, about how he was in with CIA, he was in with, the, well, now I call it FSB, but Russian intelligence, with MI6, all of these different intelligence agencies. It's because the Rothschilds had their own private intelligence agency, and they had access to all the intelligence agencies and influence. So let's keep in mind all of that as we go through this and listen to some more information about this family that was more than happy to make money on both sides of starting wars. So there might just be a connection between Epstein in all the emails talking about destabilizing the planet to continue to put money in the pockets of the people that were the architects of the debt scarcity, war profiting type of system that we operate from. Let's go.
The family crest features a fist clutching 5 arrows. The motto: Concordia, Integritas, Industria. Harmony, integrity, industry. The logic was simple. If France went to war with England, the Paris branch might suffer, but the London branch would boom, financing the British Army. The family would lend to both sides, or at least handle the money for both sides, and hedge their bets. They created the world's first clearinghouse. If a merchant in London wanted to pay a merchant in Vienna, he didn't have to ship gold across dangerous roads. He just deposited money with Nathan in London, and Solomon in Vienna paid out the cash. It was Western Union, 150 years before Western Union. It was SWIFT before computers. But the real power wasn't the money, it was the information. In 1800, information moved at the speed of a horse, or a boat. If a king died in Vienna, it took a week for the market in London to find out. If a harvest failed in France, it took days for the wheat traders in Germany to know. The Rothschilds realized this latency was the biggest arbitrage opportunity in the world. They built a private intelligence agency that put the CIA to shame. They hired private couriers, riders who changed horses every few hours. They bought fast boats that would sail across the English Channel even in storms when the Royal Navy stayed in port. They arguably used carrier pigeons to fly stock prices and political news across borders. They instructed their captains to wear different colored sashes to signal news to observers on the shore before the boat even docked. They knew the price of gold in Paris before the King of France did. They knew about riots in Madrid before the British Foreign Office did. This wasn't just an advantage, it was a cheat code. They were playing poker, and they could see everyone else's cards. While other bankers were betting on rumors, the Rothschilds were trading on facts that wouldn't be public for another 48 hours. And this brings us to the moment that made them the masters of the universe: the Napoleonic Wars. In the early 1800s, Napoleon Bonaparte was tearing up Europe. He controlled the continent. He set up the Continental System, a blockade designed to bankrupt Britain by stopping all trade. Britain was fighting back, but they had a problem. Their army, led by the Duke of Wellington, was stuck in Spain and Portugal. They needed to pay the soldiers, buy food, and bribe locals. But they couldn't get gold to Wellington. The French controlled the roads, and the seas were dangerous. The British government tried to send shipments of gold, but the exchange rates were terrible, and the merchants were ripping them off. Enter Nathan Rothschild in London. Nathan went to the British government and said, "I can do it. I can get the gold to Wellington." How? By using the Rothschild network. Nathan bought gold bullion in London. He then smuggled it into France, yes, into enemy territory. His brother James in Paris received the gold. James then walked into the French banks and exchanged the gold for bills of exchange drawn on Spanish banks. The French bankers thought James was helping them by bringing gold into the French economy. They didn't realize the gold was destined for the British army that was killing French soldiers. James then sent the bills to the Spanish border, where Rothschild agents cashed them out and delivered the funds to Wellington. Think about the level of gangsterism here. The Rothschilds were moving money through the country of the enemy to fund the army fighting that enemy, and taking a commission from both the British government, for the service, and the currency exchange markets. It was the greatest logistical feat in financial history. By 1815, Nathan Rothschild was effectively the sole financier of the British war effort. But the war was coming to an end, and everything hinged on one battle. June 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. The fate of Europe hung in the balance. If Napoleon won, the British Empire would be effectively bankrupt. British government bonds, called consols, would crash to zero. If Wellington won, the British Empire would be supreme, and consols would skyrocket. Everyone in the London Stock Exchange knew this. They were all waiting for the news. Now, we have to address the legend. There is a famous scene, often shown in movies and repeated in anti-Semitic pamphlets, where Nathan Rothschild is personally at the battlefield, watching from a hill. He sees Napoleon lose, jumps on a horse, rides to the coast, pays a fisherman a fortune to row him across a storm, and arrives at the stock exchange. He stands by his pillar, the Rothschild pillar. He looks sad. He starts selling bonds. The other traders see him selling. They whisper, "Rothschild knows. Wellington has lost." They panic. They sell everything. The market crashes by 90%. Then, at the last second, Nathan gives a secret signal to his agents, who step in and buy up the entire British debt for pennies on the dollar. The news of the victory arrives, prices soar, and Nathan owns the country.
That is the movie version. It is a myth. Nathan wasn't at the battle. He didn't crash the market by 90%. Here is the real version, which is actually smarter. Nathan did get the news first. His courier network brought him the Wellington victory news about 24 to 48 hours before the official government messenger arrived. But Nathan didn't just bet on the victory. He made a much more sophisticated bet. Everyone expected that after the war ended, the British government would stop borrowing money, so the supply of bonds would drop and prices would rise. Nathan realized something different. He realized the British government would need to borrow more money to pay for the cleanup, the pensions, and the occupation of France. So he didn't just buy the dip, he leveraged himself to the absolute hilt. He bought the bond market and held it. He kept buying for a year. He held the position through 1816 and 1817. As peace settled in and the British economy boomed, interest rates dropped, and the value of those bonds exploded. When he finally sold his position in 1817, he had realized a profit of roughly £600 million in today's money, in a single trade sequence. He increased the family fortune by a factor of 20 or 30 in 2 years. At that moment, the Rothschilds became the richest family in the world. They had more capital than the Bank of England. For the next 50 years, the Rothschilds ruled Europe. There is a famous quote attributed to a German official at the time. "There are 6 great powers in Europe: Great Britain, France, Russia, Austria, Prussia, and the Rothschild brothers. They became the bankers to the kings. But they didn't just lend money. They enforced discipline. They were the world's first bond vigilantes. If a king wanted to start a stupid war, he needed gold. He would go to Solomon in Vienna or James in Paris. The brothers would talk. If they decided the war was bad for business or bad for the stability of the bond market, they would refuse the loan. Without Rothschild gold, the armies couldn't march. They stopped wars. They started wars. They financed the independence of Brazil from Portugal by lending Brazil the money to pay Portugal to go away. They financed the creation of Belgium. They commercialized sovereign debt. Before the Rothschilds, kings borrowed from other kings or rich merchants in secret. It was personal debt. The Rothschilds created the international bond market. They issued bonds for Austria in London. They issued bonds for France in Frankfurt. They denominated the bonds in pounds sterling, the reserve currency. They paid the interest payments, coupons, at any of their branches. This meant that a British dentist could invest in Austrian roads. It globalized finance. And it privatized the tax revenues of Europe. When a peasant in Naples paid his taxes, that gold went to the government, which immediately sent it to the Rothschild office to pay the interest on the debt. They were the bottleneck of the global economy. So, if they owned Europe, why aren't they the masters of America? Why do we talk about J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller, not Rothschild, when we talk about U.S. history? This is the great failure of the family.